November 2nd, 2009, dawn breaks over the Malian desert near Gao, painting the dunes in amber and shadow as a Tuareg herder halts his camels, staring at something that absolutely shouldn't be there. A massive Boeing 727, aluminum skins scorched and twisted, half buried in the Sahara like the skeleton of a mechanical whale. The air still thick with the stench of burned jet fuel 3 days after the flames died. Inside the charred fuselage, flecks of white powder cling to melted plastic. 10 tons of cocaine, $500 million on European streets, gone to ash. But the real story isn't what burned, it's what vanished. Because somewhere in the vast emptiness of the Sahel, a convoy of Toyota Land Cruisers tears north with their cargo holds heavy with South American snow. The pilots already in Bamako with fresh passports scattering onto flights bound for Caracas and Bissau. While in a villa overlooking the Mediterranean, a phone rings and a voice shifts from rapid Spanish to French to silence. This isn't just a plane. This Boeing, tail number N126AT, is a ghost ship that spent years hopping from Venezuela to West Africa under false registrations, slipping under radar and out of reach. And tonight, its burning carcass is about to crack open a trafficking route so bold, so massive, it will rewrite everything we thought we knew about the global drug trade. So how did South American cartels turn the Sahara into a cocaine superhighway to Europe? And why torch their own plane?
To understand how a commercial airliner ended up as a drug mule in the Malian desert, we need to rewind to 2005, to the moment when everything changed in the cocaine business. For decades, Colombian and Venezuelan cartels had relied on traditional routes to move their product to Europe. Container ships crossing the Atlantic, drug mules swallowing pellets, go-fast boats skimming along African coastlines. But post-9/11 security measures were strangling these channels. Maritime patrols intensified, airport security tightened, and the old ways were dying, along with the profit margins that had made men into gods and cities into battlegrounds. Enter West Africa, corrupt, chaotic, and perfectly positioned. The mathematics were beautiful in their simplicity. A kilogram of cocaine worth $2,000 in Colombia could fetch $30,000 in West Africa, and over $60,000 once it reached European streets. But the real genius wasn't in the markup, it was in the route itself. The Sahara Desert, that vast ocean of sand stretching from Mauritania to Sudan, was essentially ungoverned space. No radar coverage, no consistent law enforcement, just thousands of nothing, punctuated by remote airstrips left over from mining operations and military campaigns. The cartels didn't discover this route, they perfected it. By 2007, the UN estimated that 50 tons of cocaine were flowing through West Africa annually. The real number was likely triple that. Retired cargo planes purchased for less than $500,000 in cash from Russian arms dealers and American scrapyards were refitted with extra fuel tanks and stripped of everything unnecessary. These weren't drug runs, they were one-way suicide missions for aircraft, each plane making perhaps 3 or 4 trips before being abandoned or destroyed. The Boeing 727 that would die in Mali was purchased through a shell company in Saudi Arabia, its paperwork laundered through Mauritania, its crew recruited from the shadow world of ex-military pilots willing to fly anything, anywhere for the right price. The network emerges from the man they called El Fantasma, the ghost, who never appeared in person. Operating from a compound in Maracaibo, Venezuela, he orchestrated what DEA agents would later call the most sophisticated transcontinental drug pipeline of the 21st century. His real name remains classified, but his fingerprints were everywhere. By 2008, the operation had evolved into clockwork precision. The Boeing 727s would take off from makeshift runways in Venezuela's Apure state, loaded with between 5 to 10 tons of cocaine. The flight path was audacious, straight across the Atlantic, 10 hours of flying below radar, burning through 40,000 pounds of fuel. The pilots, mostly Serbian and Ukrainian veterans of Balkan conflicts, flew at night, navigating by GPS and dead reckoning, maintaining radio silence for the entire journey. The landing zones were carefully selected: Tarkint in Mali, Tassilimit near Gao, abandoned strips in northern Mauritania. Local contacts, often Tuareg smugglers who had trafficked everything from cigarettes to weapons for generations, would be waiting with fuel trucks and Toyota pickups. The cocaine would be offloaded in hours, sometimes minutes, then driven north through ancient salt caravan routes toward Libya and Algeria, where it would fragment into smaller shipments bound for Europe. The money was staggering. A single successful flight could net $300 million in European markets. The pilots earned $200,000 per trip. Local officials received briefcases with $50,000 in cash just to forget what they'd seen. Entire communities along the smuggling routes were transformed overnight. Mud brick villages suddenly sprouted satellite dishes and Mercedes G-Wagons. But success bred arrogance, and arrogance bred mistakes. October 2009. The Boeing bearing registration N126AT prepared for what should have been another routine ghost flight. The crew, 2 Eastern European pilots whose names would never appear in any official report, and a Venezuelan cargo supervisor who was actually a cartel lieutenant tasked with ensuring the shipment's security. 10 tons of pure Colombian cocaine packed in military-grade containers filled the cargo hold. Something was different this time. Intelligence services had been tracking suspicious money transfers between Caracas and Bamako. Satellite imagery had captured unusual aircraft movements at remote Saharan airstrips. The French military, operating from bases in Chad and Niger as part of Operation Barkhane, had begun sharing intelligence with Malian authorities. The net was closing, but slowly. Too slowly to stop what was coming.
November 1st, 2009, Venezuelan airspace. The Boeing 727 lurches off the dirt runway, its engine screaming against the weight of fuel and cargo. Inside the cockpit, Captain Dmitry Volkov watches the altimeter climb, 3,000 feet, 5,000, 8,000. Then he banks hard east, dropping below radar coverage, skimming just 500 feet above the Caribbean waters. His co-pilot, a Serbian known only as Marko, monitors fuel consumption obsessively. They're burning 7,000 pounds per hour, riding the knife's edge of what's possible. One miscalculation, one unexpected headwind, and they'll drop into the Atlantic with 10 tons of cocaine and no rescue coming. Behind them in the cargo hold, the Venezuelan supervisor chain-smokes cigarettes, his satellite phone pressed to his ear. The buyers in Mali are nervous. There's been chatter about increased military patrols, about French reconnaissance flights photographing desert airstrips. The original landing site at Tarkint is compromised. They'll need to divert to the backup strip near Gao, adding 200 miles to an already impossible journey. As they cross into African airspace, something shifts. The usual radio silence from Mauritanian air traffic control is broken by urgent French military communications. Operation Barkhane helicopters are moving north from Niger. Malian ground forces are mobilizing. Someone, somewhere, has talked. 4:23 a.m. The Sahara Desert stretches endless below them. Volkov sees the landing strip, just a cleared stretch of hardpan marked by oil drums set ablaze. But something's wrong. The usual convoy of pickup trucks is missing. Instead, there's just one vehicle, its headlights flashing in an unfamiliar pattern. It's a trap, Marko whispers in Serbian, but they're already on fumes, the engine's coughing as the last drops of fuel burn away. Volkov has no choice. He brings the Boeing down hard, the landing gear screaming as they hit the desert floor at 180 miles per hour. They roll for what feels like forever. The plane tilted at an unnatural angle, one engine still running. The Venezuelan supervisor is already on his phone, screaming in Spanish. The buyers aren't coming. The French are 30 minutes out. The Malian army has roadblocks on every route north. 10 tons of evidence sits in the cargo hold, enough to trigger an international incident, to expose generals and ministers, to bring down the entire West African network. There's only one option left.
Volkov reaches under his seat, pulling out the emergency kit they hoped never to use. White phosphorus incendiary charges, military grade, impossible to extinguish once ignited. The three men work in silence, placing charges throughout the aircraft, dousing everything in aviation fuel. The cocaine, worth $500 million, will burn along with the plane. The flight logs, the satellite phones, everything that could connect this ghost flight to the men who sent it. As the first French helicopters appear on the horizon, Volkov throws the ignition switch. The Boeing erupts in white-hot flame, the fire so intense it can be seen from space. A funeral pyre for the Sahara Drug Highway. The three men vanish into the desert like smoke. By the time French special forces touch down, the Boeing is a crematorium, its aluminum frame melting into the sand. The heat is so intense that soldiers can't approach within 100 meters. Satellite imagery will later show the fire burned for 18 hours, visible as a bright dot on infrared sensors from orbit. What evidence remains is fragmentary. Serial numbers melted beyond recognition, cargo manifests reduced to ash, cocaine transformed into toxic smoke that drifts across the Sahel. But you can't burn away the truth. Within 48 hours, the story explodes across international media. Air cocaine becomes the scandal that nobody can ignore. In Bamako, Mali's president holds emergency meetings while DEA agents flood in from Dakar. The investigation that follows reads like a Tom Clancy novel written by Franz Kafka. Interpol traces the Boeing's history through a maze of shell companies, from its manufacture in 1975, through service with American Airlines, to its retirement in 2006, when it was supposedly scrapped in Arizona. Except it wasn't scrapped. It was sold to a Saudi company that didn't exist, registered in Mauritania under false documents, then operated by crews recruited through Serbian criminal networks. The paper trail leads everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Meanwhile, the human wreckage accumulates. In Mali, 3 government officials are arrested, then mysteriously released. A Malian air traffic controller who logged suspicious flights disappears entirely. His family claims he went to visit relatives in Senegal, but his body will turn up months later in the Niger River. In Guinea-Bissau, the former Navy chief, Admiral José Américo Bubo Nachudo, finds himself under DEA surveillance, his every movement tracked by drones and informants. The pilots, Volkov and Marco, simply cease to exist. Intelligence services track them to Bamako, where they board separate flights using different passports. Volkov's trail goes cold in Istanbul. Marco vanishes somewhere between Belgrade and Moscow. The Venezuelan supervisor is found 3 weeks later in Caracas, dead from what authorities call a swimming pool accident, despite the fact that he couldn't swim and the pool was empty. But the real revelation comes from the cocaine residue found in the burnt plane. Chemical analysis reveals it's the purest Colombian product, marked with the signature of the Norte del Valle cartel, except that cartel had supposedly been destroyed in 2008. Someone is using their recipe, their routes, their connections. The ghost of a dead organization is somehow still flying planes across the Atlantic. European drug enforcement realizes they've been looking in the wrong direction. While they focused on maritime routes and commercial shipping, an entire air bridge had been operating above their heads. Conservative estimates suggest at least 60 flights had successfully completed the Venezuela to West Africa run between 2006 and 2009. That's potentially 600 tons of cocaine, worth $30 billion on European streets.
The burnt Boeing becomes a crime scene that spans 3 continents. In December 2009, French intelligence presents a classified briefing to European security services that changes everything. Satellite data reveals an entire shadow infrastructure across the Sahel. Dozens of remote airstrips, fuel depots hidden in caves, warehouses in towns nobody's heard of. The Sahara hasn't just become a drug route, it's become a drug superhighway, complete with its own logistics network, security apparatus, and payment systems. The money trail is even more disturbing. Lebanese banks in Gambia process suspicious transfers. Dubai real estate is purchased with cash by West African generals. Swiss accounts are linked to Venezuelan shipping companies that own no ships. The drug money hasn't just corrupted individuals, it's corrupted entire institutions. Guinea-Bissau's military, once tasked with protecting the nation, has become a cartel security force. Mali's northern provinces, already unstable from Tuareg rebellions, are now awash in drug money that's funding armed groups and militants. Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, has entered the game, providing security for drug convoys in exchange for funding their operations. The terrorists who once kidnapped Western tourists for ransom have discovered that protecting cocaine shipments pays better and attracts less attention. A single convoy escort can net AQIM $200,000, enough to buy weapons, vehicles, and loyalty for months. March 2010, Operation Alcatraz launches, a joint DEA-French military initiative to dismantle the air bridge. Predator drones begin patrolling the Saharan routes. Electronic surveillance planes monitor every unauthorized flight crossing from South America. Naval vessels position themselves along the West African coast. The net is cast wide, but the fish have already learned to swim deeper. The cartels adapt with devastating efficiency. The Boeing 727s are replaced with smaller aircraft, Cessna Caravans and Beechcraft King Airs that can land on even shorter strips. Instead of 10-ton shipments, they move 500 kilograms at a time, but send 20 planes instead of one. The routes multiply and fragment. The Sahara Highway becomes a spiderweb of alternatives. April 2010, Monrovia, Liberia. A Cessna crashes on approach to Roberts International Airport, its pilot suffering a heart attack. Inside, authorities find 600 kilograms of cocaine and something more valuable, a GPS unit containing waypoints for every drug landing strip from Venezuela to Morocco, a digital map of the entire network. The pilot survives just long enough to make a deal, trading information for a promise his family won't be killed. His testimony is explosive. The network includes active generals in 4 West African nations, cabinet ministers in 3 more, and connections reaching into European ports where the cocaine enters the EU. He names El Fantasma, revealing him to be a former Venezuelan intelligence officer who went rogue after Hugo Chávez's rise to power. He describes meetings in Moroccan villas where Colombian cartel representatives sit across from Malian colonels, negotiating prices per kilogram like commodity traders. But the most chilling revelation is the scale. The burnt Boeing in Mali wasn't an anomaly, it was standard operating procedure. When planes became too risky to fly back, they were simply abandoned or destroyed. The Sahara is littered with aircraft carcasses, each one representing a successful delivery of tons of cocaine into Europe's bloodstream.
The arrests come in waves. November 10th, Nouakchott, Mauritania, 3 Air Force officers are detained with $2 million in cash hidden in fuel barrels. November 15th, Bissau, the president's own son is caught negotiating safe passage for a Colombian crew. November 22nd, Bamako, a French-Malian joint operation storms a compound, finding 2 tons of cocaine and enough weapons to arm a small army. But it's in Venezuela where the real drama unfolds. El Fantasma knows the walls are closing in. DEA informants have penetrated his network. His satellite phones are compromised. Every conversation potentially recorded, every movement possibly tracked. In his Maracaibo compound, surrounded by guards who might be government agents or cartel assassins, he makes a desperate decision. He reaches out to the DEA through intermediaries, offering the ultimate prize: complete operational details of the Sahara Highway in exchange for immunity and witness protection. The Americans are interested but cautious. This is a man responsible for flooding Europe with hundreds of tons of cocaine, for corrupting governments, for funding terrorism indirectly. Can they really make a deal with the devil? The negotiation takes weeks, conducted through encrypted messages and meetings in neutral countries. Meanwhile, the cartels have figured out there's a rat. Bodies begin appearing across Venezuela and West Africa. Anyone who might be the informant, anyone who knew too much, anyone who showed weakness. In 1 week alone, 17 people connected to the network are murdered, their deaths serving as warnings written in blood. Then, on January 15, 2011, everything changes again. The Tunisian government falls. The Arab Spring has begun. Within weeks, the entire Sahel is in chaos. The carefully constructed drug routes, dependent on stable corruption and predictable bribes, shatter like glass. Convoys are hijacked by rival militias. Aircraft are shot down by rebels with newly acquired surface-to-air missiles. The Sahara Highway becomes a war zone. The cartels pull back, abandoning 5 years of infrastructure overnight. Hundreds of millions in investment, airstrips, warehouses, vehicles, left to rot in the desert. They'll find new routes, they always do, but the golden age of air cocaine is over. In May 2011, El Fantasma disappears from his compound. Some say he's in American custody, singing to the DEA in exchange for a new identity. Others claim the cartels got him first, his body dissolved in acid, erased from existence. Venezuelan intelligence insists he never existed at all. The truth is more complex and more disturbing. Years later, leaked documents show many governments knew about the air bridge but ignored it. The profits were too big, the politics too messy. The Sahara wasn't just a desert, it was a $30 billion cocaine freeway, hiding in plain sight. Until one burning Boeing exposed everything.